I'm back, everybody. What's going on? We've got some stuff to catch up on, and of course, a big old mailbag here on Twitter Tuesday on the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I am your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. You can find the show on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. And today on the show is Twitter Tuesday. You might have noticed there was not a show yesterday. I apologize for that. Had a really long day of traveling and didn't have it in me to whip out a show, but we're back here. We are now doing Twitter Tuesday, but I got some catching up to do, mainly a transaction on the roster. So the Vikings cut a kicker, Gabe Bursick. That probably was to be expected eventually, but I thought they'd at least make it to camp and do a real competition there. But it sounds like Bursick had a pretty shaky spring, and Greg Joseph did not have much time, making short work of him in that quote-unquote competition. That's fine. All right, great. We've got our kicker for camp. No qualms about it. And with this, when it comes to the specialists and the competitions there, I do like getting that 3 squared away a little earlier, just because them building their chemistry and stuff together is really important. Almost as important. Like, I'd almost rather have a worse holder with a better sense that the kicker has a better sense of the timing for, might lead to less misses than like a better holder, but the kicker's all messed up now. We kind of saw Dan Bailey deal with that a little bit a couple years ago. So whatever, that's all fine. And with that roster spot, a couple days later, they signed Andre Mincy, an undrafted, I think he's second-year player out of Denver. He came and flashed a little bit in the joint practices the Broncos had here with the Vikings last offseason. But otherwise, there's not much about him. I mean, he's a roster bubble guy. He did make the team as an undrafted guy. Think Tishon Bauer kind of dude, right? Where you go, whoa, that undrafted rookie made the team. That's pretty cool. And then didn't end up sticking around with Denver. So the Vikings bring him in. This kind of goes for me in the Nate Hairston bag of guys Ed Donatel must have liked. So I guess he's bringing young guys that he liked, and he might have a better chance to make the team than you think. I remember when I did my last 53-man roster prediction, I had a lot of trouble with the edge group. I was like, man, am I really rostering all these guys? Am I really putting all these 4-3 edge rushers on the team that don't really seem to have the diverse skill set we're looking for now? And that Andre Mincy might be an answer to that. But it also might just be, hey, Ed Donatel liked this guy and he came available, so let's do it, right? And we'll see what happens. Hard to really say any more about him than that until we get to, maybe we'll do a Storytime series thing about him a little later. But for now, I would like to move on to the mailbag. It's Twitter Tuesday. I'm answering your questions. If you have questions for me, you can always shoot them to me at LockedOnVikings or at Luke Braun NFL on Twitter. You can send an email to LockedOnVikingsPodcast@gmail.com, or you can fill out the Google form, which is in the show notes. You can do that anytime, and I'll get around to the question whenever the next Tuesday is, assuming I don't forget. So let's get on with this mailbag. The first one I'm going to do comes from SportsGuy79, who says, Mahomes is making $50 million a year. If you had to build a team around Mahomes on that contract or Kirk Cousins, what would the average annual value of Kirk's contract need to be for you to pick Kirk over Mahomes? You're not going to like my answer to this. I don't think there's a number. Because, there's not a realistic number, right? If Kirk Cousins were free, okay, that's a different conversation, but we have to go kind of into the realm of fantasy land to get to that point. Because here's the deal. And I've been clear about this. I've gone on a lot of other people's shows who have been like, oh, why do you hate Kirk Cousins? My problem with Kirk Cousins has never been his contract. And I do think a lot of people get kind of weird about players getting a lot of money. They feel almost like you're wasting our team's money, and it's not your money, man. It's the Wills. They've got enough. But beyond that, it's never been about the cap hit to me. If you listen to this show, there's so many ways to get around cap hits and to restructure things and do whatever. Whatever it is you want to do, you can go do. And I think, honestly, the thing that restricts teams more from going out and pursuing free agents is when they feel good about their guy. The Vikings didn't go out and get a big tackle because they feel like they have tackles, and sometimes they can be wrong about that. They didn't go out and get a center because they like Bradbury. You can be like, wow, I think they're wrong about that. That's totally valid. But I don't know if it's like, well, they just they couldn't make the money for it. Like they went out and gave $14 million a year to Zadarius Smith, and they signed him to the weirdest contract ever so that his cap hit was really small this year and put a bunch into next year. But like I say all the time, next year, they can do the same thing with a free agent and put more stuff into 2023. And then in 2023, they can do the same thing with a free agent and, get a little bit of space and put a bunch into 2024. And until we run out of years, until society collapses and the NFL stops happening, I think there will always be years to push things into. So it's all going to be fine until eventually you get to a point where you're like where the Bears are now, where they just knew that like, we're not going to be competitive. Let's just balance the books and, kind of have a crappy team. Which I don't know if I even agree with that they had to do that. I think they probably could have built better around Justin Fields. I digress. The thing about Kirk, if you shave $10 million off of his cap hit, he still checks down on 3rd and 6. And that's the problem that I have with Kirk Cousins. It's the mentality. It's the live to fight another day without actually ever taking the really aggressive kind of the discomfort with taking a risk that isn't by the book that I think a quarterback needs to have. And that will just always leave a bunch of meat on the bone. That is just never going to get the most out of somebody like a Justin Jefferson. There's just always going to be, Justin Jefferson with Patrick Mahomes could be almost a 2,000-yard receiver, right? With Kirk Cousins, he was a 1,400-yard receiver. That's great because Justin Jefferson rules. But if we're talking about Kirk versus Mahomes, I'll find 10 mil a cap, or I'll find $20 million in cap. Give me the playmaker. Give me the MVP, right? Alexander the Dane asks, what are your expectations for Zach Davidson in year 2? New Tyler Conklin. That'd be so sick if he were. I don't have very high expectations for Zach Davidson. When he came out, he didn't know how to run routes. And I don't mean his route running was unpolished or he had things that he needed to learn that. He knew he could run a route like with as much technical refinement as like a random person could. He just didn't have any technique at all. He had a ton of athleticism and he was really explosive and he played at a smaller school where he could get away with that kind of thing. And he just didn't have there's no technique at all to it. And you can't put that guy on the field. You can't roster that guy. And it showed in the preseason as well. Here's the deal. I think if Zach Davidson makes the team, I would be pretty happy with that. I think that would be a really, really positive result for Zach Davidson. My real expectation is more, let's stash him on the practice squad for one more year, see if he can refine his stuff in the background, see what he can learn after 2 whole years, and then if he doesn't make the team in year 3, we probably move on and call it a didn't make it. That's fine. But that new Tyler Conklin, no way. If anybody is the new Tyler Conklin, it's probably like Johnny Munt, or if you're really into Nick Muse, maybe him. But I don't think Zach Davidson can be that guy until proven otherwise. Like I need to see him set up a route. I need to see him, have the right choppy footwork and use that at the right time. I need to see him release off of a line. And he's pretty tenacious as a blocker, which will definitely help too. But the expectations are pretty low right now. I have a whole bunch more questions to get to, and I really want to make sure that I get to them. But first, let me talk to you about Blue Nile. Whether it's an anniversary or an engagement or some other thing, whatever it is you're celebrating, maybe just a nice little jewelry gift for no reason, do it at BlueNile.com. They've got online experts 24/7 that can help you customize things so you're getting exactly what is right for your partner. It is not one size fits all. Anybody can tell you that. So go to BlueNile.com. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from Blue Nile. And Locked On Vikings listeners get $50 off of purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement, so use code LOCKEDON. That's code LOCKEDON. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever peace. Go to BlueNile.com today. Thanks so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Hey, for your second listen, if you're an NBA fan, maybe a Timberwolves fan, looking forward to the draft. You know how we did that ultimate mock draft for Locked On NFL and all the NFL hosts got together? We did a big mock draft together. It was a whole big thing. NBA's doing the same thing. So don't miss a pick. Go search Ultimate Mock Draft wherever you find your podcasts. They've got all the experts, all of the local experts from all of the shows, Odyssey's list of experts as well. It is a huge, huge, huge production, and it's super, super dope. So go to the Ultimate NBA Mock Draft. You can search it out wherever you find your podcasts. Moving on with this mailbag. The next one comes from Swagmaster Cleve, who asks, what are the odds Ingram actually starts at guard? I'm going to be honest, I have no idea. I have no idea what to expect from him. I'm trying not to, like, if I wanted to make this, I made a mistake with Wyatt Davis. I looked at his college tape. I really liked his college tape, and I was like, man, I don't know. It seems like there's no way that he doesn't win this job as long as he doesn't experience rookie stuff, I think is what I said. And to be fair, my hedge saved me there because rookie stuff is getting hurt and then not having your first camp and never getting your feet under you and never transitioning to the NFL is absolutely rookie stuff. So I'm not going to accept defeat on that. But I do want to put the same hedge on Ed Ingram. Look, I think based on his college tape, I would say that Ed Ingram's better at pass blocking than like Jesse Davis or Chris Reed. I like the odds of that happening. There's, of course, a little bit of weirdness with his rookie contract right now, and we got to make sure there isn't some kind of holdout or some kind of other provision. It might have something to do with off field. It might not. I genuinely don't know, and I'm not going to speculate on that. But I don't know. The odds are certainly not zero, but I don't know. Ask me like a week or two into camp when I see what he's doing on the second team. Then I think we'll have a better sense. Andrew Olson asks a similar one. What starting lineup for the offensive line has the highest odds week one? Okay, so going through the four main ones, I have a really tough time seeing any of them getting benched the way the Vikings have behaved. I mean, Bradbury's not getting benched. Chris Reed took some center snaps with Austin Schlottman out with like food poisoning. But if anything, Austin Schlottman's like the backup center and makes the team on that. And then Chris Reed goes back to competing for that right guard job. So of course you're not going to bench O'Neal or Darius Haw. I think Cleveland's got his job locked down. So I think those four are pretty much set in stone. And then it's really the right guard thing. So your odds on favorite right now, I would have to say, is Jesse Davis, just because he's the one taking the first team reps. Chris Reed could win that job. Ed Ingram could win that job. And I think it would be I think it's going to be a genuine competition of Davis and Reed. Wyatt Davis seems pretty much out of that conversation. He's on the third team or he's moving to left guard. And we talked to Sam Ekstrom last week about it. Kind of seemed like it was Sam Ekstrom was saying like he's kind of being taught multiple positions and that's going to be his angle to make the team. And if he has to like successfully do that to like successfully make the team. But in terms of the other three, Jesse Davis, Chris Reed, and Ed Ingram, I'm going to guess one of them becomes a swing backup. Jesse Davis and Chris Reed both, it seems like they like both to play multiple positions. And then Ed Ingram is either in the incubator and doesn't start or he wins the starting job. But it seems like the two veterans will trade first team reps at the start of camp, and then Ed Ingram will play the second team, and it's kind of on Ed Ingram to change and overturn that status quo with the quality of his play. That's going to be where camp starts. In terms of the odds things work out, I have no idea, right? Practices can go any way, but that's probably where I'm at. If I had to guess who's got the biggest chance, it's Jesse Davis, but it's all probably 40%, 40%, 30%, 30%, that kind of thing. Realistic Vike fan asks, out of the last 5 or 10 years' biggest draft busts, which would you wish didn't bust that would have helped the team drastically, except QB? Would you rather have a dynamic Laquan Treadwell or a shutdown Mike Hughes, just for an example? Okay, so the only quarterback I would have been able to say would be Teddy, and I wouldn't call him a bust. He just got injured and left the team over it. But that leaves me, I'm trying to think of the draft busts, right? Like Laquan Treadwell's the big one. Mike Hughes also, like you would say, Mike Hughes stays healthy would be the way you'd have to do that. Because I don't think Mike Hughes was like that. I think he got hurt a lot. Although his size has really, really, really been a struggle in KC. I'm probably going to say it's a little unfair to call Jeff Gladney a bust, especially in light of recent events and everything like that. But Jeff Gladney and everything that happened to him in the last couple years, up to and including his death, is just the biggest bummer in the world. Like, I really wish things could have panned out differently with him, not only on the field, but of course off it. It's a big bummer, everything that happened there. And if there could have been a corner in that draft class that, helped the Vikings roster out, that would have been great. But I also feel like there's like a lot of human reasons to want that. So I'll go with that. But if you didn't want to count that, or if you wanted to set that aside and not put it in the category of busts just out of respect, I get that. But in that case, I don't know, probably would say like Laquan Treadwell would have been super sick to have like a third really cool receiver with Diggs and Thielen in those years. Klein Zaddy asks, any scuttlebutt on a punt returner front runner? Seems like kind of the one open competition I haven't heard much steam about. Yeah, you probably wouldn't have heard much steam about it in spring. In the spring program, they're not doing returning ability or anything like that. And usually, I mean, the way the Zimmer regime did it, which I have to imagine it's not going to be that different really on any team, including this new staff. But the way it usually goes down, at least the way I'm used to seeing it, is they would have the punt returners would all line up, and there'd be like 9 of them to start. And essentially, the last guy to fumble gets the job. It's also like, who's the most consistent, who's the most... You want dynamic returnability and kind of the things that would make a guy a punt returner in Madden. But you also are looking for who tracks it well, who doesn't bobble it when he's catching, who's got more ball security, that kind of thing. I'd rather have a super boring punt returner that never fumbles than a super dynamic one that, anything weird can happen. So either way, none of that's going to get determined in the spring because they're not going full speed on any of this stuff. The drills are really, really, a lot more of it is just about knowing what to do and where to line up and all that stuff. So that is probably not going to be something determined until you're well into proper camp. So yeah, no, you wouldn't hear anything about this. So no scuttlebutt on a front runner. It could be a number of people. Got a whole bunch more questions, of course, but first, let me talk to you about Grambling. BetOnline is your one-stop shop for all things Grambling. Look, the NBA Finals are going. The Warriors are what, a game away? If you think they're going to do it, then bet it. Go to betonline.net. You can bet on that. You can bet on the hockey playoffs. You can bet on WNBA, tennis, golf, whatever this weekend's fight is. You can bet on all of that stuff at betonline.net. You can bet on player props. You can build your own freaky parlays with their player props builder. You can bet in the middle of games with their live betting apparatus. It's awesome. So go to betonline.net where the game starts. Moving on with this Twitter Tuesday mailbag. Next one comes from League of Ice Dreamers, who say, some say number 4 is a good receiving back. Some, like Arif Hassan, say he's maybe overrated as a receiving back. What does a good receiving back do to win against coverages or versus wide receiver or tight end pass catchers? Yeah, I think for like a receiving back, it's a different skill set, right? I don't know what Arif's argument is really, so I can't really respond to what he thinks. But the way I see receiving backs is... they need to be elusive in space because a receiving running back, some of it is sometimes you send them up the seam or on an angle route and they have to actually run a route and like shed coverage or whatever. But for the most part, if it's man-to-man coverage, it's almost never going to go to the running back in terms of like a check down. And when I think receiving back, I think, is he a good check down? Right? Because if you have to check it down to the running back, I want a guy that can make his man miss and turn that into a 9-yard play. And suddenly a play broke down and we made it 2nd and 1 anyways. That's what I want out of a receiving back. And like elusiveness in space, Dalvin Cook's one of the best. There are a few backs out there who are like true, could just line up as a wide receiver and win. Alvin Kamara is one of those, Christian McCaffrey, CJ Ham even. But aside from those, clearly, elite players with a much different kind of vibe, it's more about like Dalvin Cook is probably a good back in terms of like yards gained per pass caught or whatever, but maybe, I don't know. I don't really care. But it's more about like, he's a guy that can make a dude miss in the open field. And that's what you're looking for. In terms of like anything crazier than that, if you're sending him out on actual deep routes, you want a guy with like, wide receiver experience probably. And I don't know if Dalvin Cook like checks that box. I don't know if I'd want him to. I don't know if I'd want to send him that way, but for me, it's a lot more about, get that guy the ball in the flat somehow. And does he make a dude miss, right? Can he turn a screen into a big play? Can he properly read and space a screen, which Dalvin Cook's really, really good at that. So I would say, yeah, he's a good receiving back for those reasons. But if you're going to talk about like the game Alvin Kamara has, it's sort of a different beast. MN Hopes asks, if you could make a full 22-man roster out of the NFC North, who would be at each position? All right, I'm doing this till I get bored. I'm not doing all 22-man. Quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, obviously. Running back, Dalvin Cook. Yeah, sure. Let's go with some wide receivers. I'll put Justin Jefferson in there. Oh, I can't do Devontae Adams anymore. Oh, what a shame. Got Gosh, oh my goodness. What, Sammy Watkins? Oh my God. I guess it's just the Vikings receivers. Sure. Holy crap. It's real rough out there, huh? Offensive line, I want Bakhtiari, probably a bunch of Lions on the offensive line. On the defensive side of the ball, I definitely want like Daniil Hunter. I like Harrison Smith a lot. I like Adrian Amos a lot. Jair Alexander, that's a big one. Roquan Smith would be a big one. And I'm bored. So I don't know. Whoever else you want for the rest of them. Rorschach Cousins asks, the NFL likes to bill itself as a 365-day league. But this time between now and preseason is awful, no good discourse, and the only newsworthy stuff ends up being a contest to see which player, front office, or owner can out-horrible the rest. What should the NFL do to fix this dead zone? So the answer is spring and summer leagues, the USFL and whatnot, and the XFL and all that stuff. Embrace that. Because right now, the USFL, it has its playoffs clinched. A very weird spring league season with 8 teams and 3 of them are entirely unviable, which is wild. Like there's 2 1-win teams and a 2-win team, and it's week 9, which is kind of an insane like drop off. I digress. The Pittsburgh Maulers are a catastrophe. Sorry, I can't help myself. But they're about to enter their inaugural playoffs, and that's pretty cool. I think the fan-controlled football thing could have been really dope. And it sort of got hijacked by a weird crypto bro energy that like turns just, I don't know, just like weirds me out a little. I don't know, something about it like turns me off to it. But the idea of, fan participation and in a 7-on-7 league and in sort of a more informal thing, the European league is going on. The NFL should embrace this stuff. They should start airing games on NFL Network. They should lend NFL crews or broadcast people, assuming that there can then be some kind of like revenue share or something like that. Like I think there's good business in this for the NFL that can keep people hooked to football like kind of year round. And I think that would be the name of the game. Grant Sutter asks, I'm buying the Vikings. You are my first hire. What position in the organization are you taking? Head coach, GM, president, scout, etc. My answer to this, I've gotten questions like this before, is QC coach, and you shouldn't trust me to do anything more. QC coach is a job I know I'm tailor-made to do. All you're doing is scrubbing through a bunch of tape, and you're making cut-ups of like, 3rd and 6 when they lined up in, double wing or whatever. That is something I'm an editor in my other job, a video editor. That's a lot of logging footage and a lot of tedium and a lot of organizing, lots of little clips. It's exactly what I need to do as a QC coach. So I have that experience and I have at least enough know-how to know, like, if they ask me, hey, find all the clips in this formation or find all the clips when, this guy was a stand-up edge rusher or something like that. Like I've got at least enough knowledge to know that, but I don't have to have any more knowledge. So I would definitely be a QC coach. Anything else, you're making a huge mistake. If you actually put me in charge of a position group, I'd have no idea what I was doing. If you put me in charge of like scouting or anything, I would love to be like an advanced scout, or like a pro scout or something. Like advanced scouting as in like scouting like next week's matchup and trying to find tendencies or whatever. That would be super fun, but I definitely would be bad at it to start, and I would have a pretty steep learning curve on it. But something where I'm watching a lot of tape and logging stuff is the skill set you need me for, and everything else I need to gain a lot more knowledge before I'm ready to do that job. Nick Howard asks, why bunnies and not, say, cats or dogs? I don't know, why cats over dogs? Why dogs over cats? We just like them. We like our babies. We will get dogs someday. We don't have a yard right now, and my girlfriend's deathly allergic to cats, so that's probably not in the cards. But no shade on cats. Cats are great. KSG asks, who would win an Oklahoma drill and why? Kirk Cousins versus Kevin O'Connell. I gotta say the dude in player shape, right? Like, Kevin O'Connell looks like he's in totally fine shape, but being in NFL football shape, ask any player, is a totally different beast, even for the quarterbacks and the kickers and stuff. Like, have you ever seen, like, the weight regimen that these guys do every day? Like, these dudes are in shape. I gotta think that Kirk Cousins would blow out O'Connell. Ryan asks, if you had to mix beef and ice cream, what's your dish of choice? This is your price to bear as a Bradbury stan. Is it steak a la mode, blizzard with ground beef? How about a tallow caramel sundae? Okay, tallow caramel sounds very interesting, right? Like, you could use beef tallow in place of any fat in a dessert that involves ice cream. Like, you could use it probably in some way as like a substitute for like a pie crust, and then you'd have that pie a la mode or something like that. So that could be something. There is an ice cream place in Los Angeles which is where I live, called Salt and Straw. I don't know if they have any other locations, but they're like a thing in LA that has very frequently all sorts of weird stuff. And they have used meats in their ice cream, and they've like jerkied them and candied them. So it's like sweet and salty kind of. And their whole gimmick is like, this sounds bad, but it's really good. And so it worked out. So I would probably cut up the beef into little pieces, like fry it or dry it out, like cure it, and then candy it. And then use that as a mix-in for just like vanilla ice cream. I think that's probably the best thing you got. But that was a reference to Garrett Bradbury saying he ate a bunch of beef and ice cream and he gained a bunch of weight. Great. Good for you, buddy. But I am the final Bradbury defender. I'm the final Bradbury apologist. I take this burden. I would candy the beef and put it in ice cream. Ruben Frost asked, what piece do you play as Monopoly? Big battleship guy, top hat guy if the battleship is taken. I very rarely care that much about it, and I usually let everybody else pick first because I don't want to step on any toes. And finally, Don from Ohio asks, why did you sabotage last week's Norse Code podcast? Wouldn't you? All right, tomorrow on the show, we might still do some history stuff. We might talk a little bit more about what's been going on at OTAs, or maybe even do some story time. I don't know. We'll see what kind of mood strikes me. FYI, if you can't hear it in my voice, I'm a little under the weather. And so if I miss any other shows this week or next, that's probably why. But I'm going to do my best to get a show out to you every single day as long as I'm feeling all right enough to do it. So I will see you all most likely tomorrow. And as always, Skull.